Hello everyone, it is April and today I'm here to share with you my top 5 thrillers that I read in 2020. So let's dive right in. So many amazing books in 2020. I read over 100 books, but I narrowed my favorite thrillers down to just 5, and I've even ranked them, which was actually not as hard for thrillers as other genres. But let's dive right in. In the number 5 spot, we have No Exit by Taylor Adams. I read this fairly recently. I read it in December. It was my Patreon book club pick for the month, and it was the perfect time to read it. This takes place in December in a snowstorm, and we follow a woman who is driving home in a blizzard quite hurriedly because her mother is dying, and she's trying to get there in time before she dies. Unfortunately, the blizzard is so bad, she needs to stop. She pulls off at a rest stop, and chaos ensues. She sees that there is a child locked in a cage in the back of a van in a neighboring vehicle. So she knows that someone at this rest stop, and it's not a big rest stop, someone has kidnapped this child, and she now has to save this child. And it follows from there. It is a very graphic story, I will say. Like, if you liked Karen Slaughter's Pretty Girls, visceral violence of that book, you might like No Exit. I really ended up liking it. It was just a wild ride. I was turning the pages. It's such an easy read. Like, some people just read this in one sitting, and it's just wonderful. Next is a book that has grown on me more and more since I finished it. I think I only gave this 4 stars and gave No Exit 5 stars, and yet here it is in the 4th spot. This is House of Correction by Nikki French. You guys will know how much I fallen in love with the author Nikki French, who is a husband and wife duo, by the way. House of Correction follows a young woman who's moved back to her hometown after years of being away. She's bought a house that she's fixing up. Unfortunately, there's a dead man found in her shed, and people believe that she killed him, and she's on trial. She decides to defend herself in this trial. She fires her lawyer and goes to defend herself. So you follow her, combing through all of the evidence against her. She also has a history of mental health issues in terms of depression. She has very severe depression, and so she was having a bad day that day as it is, and she doesn't remember a lot of it. And so she's trying to piece all of this together. She's meeting with people in this small village that she knows most of these people. She knew the victim, and she's combing through the evidence, and then you follow her on trial defending herself. And she doesn't know what she's doing. So there's lots of moments where the judge is like, you can't do that, you can't do this, you have to do it this way. And she's navigating through it. She's also not always the most likable character. She's really real. She felt real, and I didn't always like her. I was rooting for her. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't always like her. It stayed with me since I read it in a way that most thrillers don't. So yeah, House of Correction for the win. In the number 3 spot, we've got The Chestnut Man. This was brutal and really good. This is a detective story. We follow a couple of detectives trying to find the Chestnut Man. He is a serial killer, and he kills mostly women in really brutal ways. Very, very brutal. He leaves these little chestnut figures by the bodies, and we follow these detectives trying to track this guy down before he kills again. And We also follow the mother of a girl who went missing like a year ago. Everyone thinks that she's dead. This mother is a political figure as well and is trying to get back to work since her daughter has vanished, presumed dead. But that is all stopped in its tracks when a fingerprint is found on one of those Chestnut Men and it belongs to her child. So is her child still alive? Oh my goodness, I loved this book. It's a chunker, 500-ish pages, but I just flew through it. I needed to know. I needed to know. It was so easy to read. This is by the author of, the creator, I should say, of The Killing, which was an amazing series. This is going to be turned into a series. Oh my God, I loved it. Next is Rewind by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is in the number 2 spot. Wow, I fell completely in love with Catherine Ryan Howard's writing. I since have like bought all of her books. This follows 3 perspectives. We follow a woman who's an influencer, social media influencer. She discovers something about her husband and is brought to Shannon Moore Cottages to find out what has gone on with her husband. We also follow the manager of Shannon Moore Cottages, who is a creepy man who actually puts cameras in all of his rooms and watches the people who stay. And then we follow a journalist who's trying to find a missing woman. I couldn't put this down. I gifted this to one of my friends who's really into thrillers. I hope she reads it soon. Although I worry a little bit because like my taste in thrillers is a little bit gritty and like this can be violent, you know, but I just fell in love and there's no looking back. Like I'm totally going to read tons of Catherine Ryan Howard in 2021. That's for sure. So good. People need to talk about her more often. And then my number 1 in thrillers, no one is going to be surprised. This stands in for a lot of books. This is the first in the series by Nikki French. This is the Frida Klein series, and we follow psychotherapist Frida Klein, who dives into all sorts of cases, all sorts of mysteries, kidnappings, murders, rapes, so many things. And she's, you know, not a police detective, but somehow managed to get involved in all of these stories. In the first book, we follow her with one of her patients who's going through infertility with his wife, and he's explained to her that he keeps imagining and dreaming of this redheaded boy that should be his. He has red hair. He just always imagined this little boy. And then like 2 days later, a boy of a very similar description goes missing, and so she feels like she has to get involved. She has to go to the police just in case he is involved, which is understandable. There is a mystery that strings itself throughout the books. Place is very important. This takes place in London. Frida has a fascination with the rivers that are underground in London, and like she goes for lots of walks along these rivers. Frida herself is such a mystery and an onion that you get to unpeel over the course of these 8 books. And I miss her so much. I miss her so much, but I also feel privileged that I got to know her. Like she's that real. Yeah, Nikki French can write very visceral, real people, it seems. So those are my favorite thriller books that I read in 2020.